Welcome, welcome. This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read a bunch of stuff this week.
I watched a movie. This week we are covering Minari. It was just nominated for 6 Academy Awards.
Golf.
6, which I'm kind of like, I didn't even realize that. Famously, it's been nominated, and an actor in a leading role for Steven Yeun. He also helped produce the film. Nominated for Best Picture. Nominated in directing for Lee Isaac Chung, actress in a supporting role. And it's also nominated for screenplay and score. Those almost kind of got washed away in the buzz of everything else. I'm happy to report that of the of the Best Picture nominees, this is definitely the easiest going down. So it's certainly it's very serious, and it's talking about very, very relevant things that we're going to undress here and talk around. But as far as like the Best Picture nominees, they're also brutal. They're very brutal.
Right.
They're very serious movies. You know, like the next step down from this, I would have to say, is like The Father, which is about Alzheimer's.
But even still,
and his world falls apart. It's like, it's not fun. Like it's not a good time, you know, like, and it's not that it's supposed to be a good time, but this whole sleuth of things, it's a very, very starkly stacked Best Picture list. So Minari is really the sip of tea in the middle of it all. I'm really happy that we're getting into the middle of it here, especially with all of the talk, not only with Asians breaking into the Oscars, but then also of recent events just this week, the shootings in Atlanta. So it ties all into what we're going to be talking about here today.
Mm-hmm. Mostly we'll be discussing the writer and director, Lee Isaac Chung. This is a semi-autobiographical take on Arkansas in the 1980s and his experience growing up there. There is a surprising literary influence, which was difficult to uncover, but we'll get to that when we talk about his writing and how he came up with all this. Super, super, super cool. But the title, firstly, Minari.
Yeah, exactly. For the first Actimax, I'm like actively asking even my wife, I was like, what is Minari? we're like 20 minutes in, like, what is Minari?
Yeah. We could assume that it's a Korean word, but it is the edible plant native to most of East Asia. It's also called the water dropwort, the Chinese celery, Japanese parsley. It's featured in the plot, so eventually by the end, you know what it is. And
yeah.
Chung had said in an interview, he was like, it's a kind of weed we end up eating, but the main actress who plays the grandma, she was like, it's not a weed, it's a vegetable. So he had to say, I can't desecrate the name of this thing. But the actual kind of symbolism, implications for it, hopefully we'll see in the story of how this whole piece came to be. Because you had said before that it wasn't quite apparent.
Yeah,
like the film is very contemplative.
Yeah. It's so contemplative. It's a sip of tea, the whole thing. and so this follows an immigrant family settling down and building a farm, and they're growing Korean vegetables. And the grandmother comes to live with them, and she suggests that they plant Minari by the creek side. There's this creek far off in the woods from the fields of the farm. Again, to bring back up the Best Picture stacked list, the plot of this movie centers around, where are we going to get water? How can we make this farm financially solvable with getting creative? How do we use our minds to solve this problem? Because we can't afford to pay for the city water. So they try to drill their own, but there is a creek side that's in the woods that is kind of brushed off through much of the film, and it is embraced at the end, and that is the closing moments. But you know, I'm meditating in the aura of that, and I'm swimming in it. But I was still trying to define exactly. I want to get closer to what the filmmakers were really, saying with the Minari, what that actually comes back to say. So I'm really interested to see what you might have judged up.
Well, we'll get to that. Got to start at the beginning, though. Who is Lee Isaac Chung? He was born in Denver. His parents were chicken sexers, like they are in the film, and he lived briefly in Atlanta before moving to a small farm in Lincoln, Arkansas, which is super close to the Oklahoma border. And they actually filmed the film in Oklahoma, closer to Tulsa, I believe, because of filming incentives and whatnot. But where he grew up is the home of the Arkansas Apple Festival, population 1,700, and the demographics, just because I was curious, 91% white, 5% Hispanic, 2.5% Native American, 0.06% Asian.
Wow.
So he said they were the only Asian Americans there. And what is real life, I also thought was interesting, because it is, like you said, a semi-autobiographical take. The characters are very close. A lot of the situations, the thing with Mountain Dew, which we won't spoil, he said he actually did as a kid. And he was saying his dad was always talking about the color of the dirt, really excited to have this plot of land.
This is the best dirt in America.
And his dad had a dedication to growing Korean produce, especially Korean pears. They had 50 acres of land. Like I said, they moved to Arkansas. And also similar, his dad didn't tell his mom they were going to do this, which he remembers from being a kid, the conflicts of. And similar to his mom not knowing that, and he had an older sister as well, has an older sister. His parents didn't know he was making this film. They're very private, he said, and he didn't tell them he was making it until it was being edited and completed, because he was so scared about what they were going to say, because it's so personal.
Right.
And basically his life and a representation of them, and he respects them. And
it's so much more, just by what you're saying, it's so much more autobiographical than I assumed.
Yeah.
Like,
so then hopefully we can uncover, it's like, well, why would you do this if it's such a sensitive subject, or you're so worried about, but just keep that in the back of your mind, that it's like, this is not something that he's necessarily like, let me just do a tell-all expose on my parents. That's not in his nature, making this. So how did he get into film in the first place, coming from this town of 1700 in Arkansas, and his parents are farmers?
Right.
He ends up going to school at Yale to study biology, moving upward in the world. But he had a world cinema class his senior year and dropped the medical science profession to pursue film as a senior. And he applied to 10 to 15 film schools, he said, and they all rejected him. And so then he said, I'm going to apply to 3 more. And he got in, and then did graduate studies, got a master's in film at the University of Utah in 2004.
There are a lot of schools out there gulping this week.
Yeah. Like, why? His first film that he did, this was super fascinating to me. It is a foreign language film, but not Korean. It is Kinyarwanda, which is the language spoken by at least 10 million people in Rwanda.
Oh, interesting.
It is the first narrative feature film in that language.
Oh,
it was his debut feature film. So I had to say, how in the world? Where did that come from?
Where does this idea come from?
Yeah. So the film is called Munyarangabo. If I got that right, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. But,
please forgive us.
His wife, Valerie, is an art therapist, and she volunteered in Rwanda in 2006, 2 years after he graduated. And so he went along with her, joined, and taught as a part of this relief-based effort, a filmmaking class, providing these students with training. And then he said, well, let's make something. Let's do this. So it's the story of a friendship between 2 boys, and this is after the Rwandan genocide. They shot it over 11 days. He used all the students, non-actors, throughout the orphanages, and students as the crew.
Wow.
Went to all the festivals, won some things, and that was his first film that he made.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How special is that?
Yeah.
Can you imagine being a kid now and having worked on that?
Mm-hmm. And so it extends even outside of that. So he now continues to be involved and mentors young Rwandan filmmakers. He has a production company called Almond Tree, and it's based in Rwanda, and they've produced several short films that have gone to festivals and whatnot. So he continues to work out of there, which I thought, brilliant, genius. What an amazing,
it's beautiful
first effort. Yeah. So he's in the independent, outside of the mainstream scene. What comes next is 2 other films, independent features. And in 2015, he co-directed, again in Rwanda, a documentary about family relations and the history of a genocide survivor there. So he has a couple things under his belt, but again, very small, independent.
Right. But it's really started making sense. He's studying film. He gets, she goes off to do this thing. He follows. He's able to, apply his talents. And here's a project. And here's a little other project. It's no big, wild smash hits, but like this is the work. This is really what it. This he's just doing it. He's just being a filmmaker, and he's pulling these real stories that are palpable. These are important stories, and to be spreading it in that part of the world, it's like
it's amazing.
This is what art should be for. This is great.
Yeah. But we get to the point where it's 2018 now, and like I said, he went and got his master's in this. He was originally spent all that time learning to become a doctor in some way. He's reaching 40 years old. And so he's like, is this a thing that's going to be anything? And so this is where he kind of says, well, am I going to give up on my dream? Because he's officially taken an instructor position. There's the University of Utah, where he got his master's, is opening up a campus in South Korea. And so he takes on a position to teach there, film, but and he's going to bring his wife and daughter, and he wants them to live in Korea for a time, so they move. And he thinks, God, I have one last shot at this. Like, I should at least write something. I'll at least write it in the few months before I have to go teach, and then that's going to be my thing. But I can't not do one last thing.
Give myself a real shot.
Yeah. Then the question becomes, what is he going to write? And I found an article on how he came up with this, but it only came out, and I don't know if people know about this or if he's going to talk about it in other interviews, but now that the dust settles, because he said he didn't tell anyone, this is the literary source that this comes from. And this is a whirlwind of a tale. And he said he hadn't told anybody the true story of this for fear of sounding like a fool or a mystic. And I love foolish and mystical stories. So off we go. This is him happening. Like I said, he's about to move to South Korea in a couple months. So what am I going to write? Sitting in a coffee shop in Pasadena, communing with something to try and get an answer. And he said, and here comes the mystic stuff. A name comes to him. The name is Willa Cather. He's like, I don't usually hear voices in the coffee shops in Pasadena, but this name appears in the transom of his mind. He's like, who is this? Is this an actress? What? Is this a historical figure? I don't know this name. This is not something that I'm aware of. So he goes, looks it up. Willa Cather is a great novelist, this amazing novelist, American novelist, who died in 1961, and her works are in the public domain. Now, this is a boon for an independent artist to hear public domain, because anybody can make it. So he decides, well, I'm just going to follow the breadcrumb trail here of this random novelist that I've never heard of. So he goes to the library. There's no Cliff's Notes on her. So he decides, this is his logic, he's going to pick out the book that has the most duplicate copies, because clearly that's the one that people care the most about. And that book is My Antonia, and it is about a boy who grows up on a farm in Nebraska. And so he says, oh, I can jive with this stuff.
I'm a boy that grew up on a farm.
Yeah, pretty close. So who's Willa Cather then? And what is her deal? She is a novelist of the early 1900s. Her whole thing was about the Great Plains pioneering experience. Actually, after writing The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald said, quote, in comparison to My Antonia, it was a failure. Like, he liked that book more than his epic thing. And the reason is, so what's My Antonia? It came out in 1918. It is about an orphaned boy and the elder daughter of immigrants who are each brought as children to be pioneers in Nebraska.
Whoa!
And it basically follows their first year in a new place, and it leaves a strong impression on the kids. And as a whole, Willa Cather's work was super radical for the time, which I think also is why F. Scott Fitzgerald liked it, because it was, insane to feature a lower class or immigrant families as the subject, and not the wealthy, quote, American families in literature, such as A Great Gatsby, like all these rich people. So
faking the royal look.
Exactly. Yeah. She also commented on women's rights, had a lot of subdued, but their sexual metaphors, like very interesting stuff. She won the Pulitzer Prize in 23. But this is who he's just uncovered, and specifically this book.
Well, it's easy to see how he could be vibing.
Right. So he's vibing with it. He's like, oh, here it is. So then he goes on to read more about her, and he reads, she had one experience with Hollywood. They adapted a book that she wrote called A Lost Lady in 1934, and she absolutely hated it. It was awful. And so she said one of her dying wishes was that no one would adapt her books ever again.
Oh.
And so he's like, if this started mystically in this way, I'm not going to mess with a woman's dying wish. Like, clearly that was not the reason that her name came to me in this capacity. So he keeps researching, and he keeps researching her story. And the more he researches her, the more he sees him, because maybe this isn't about the story she wrote, but this is about her. So
Yeah.
her autobiography, she was also a farm kid who then moved into East Coast academia. She had planned to become a doctor and risked it by going into
No
the arts.
way.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And she also had few small successes, but felt discouraged and thought about quitting. And the thing that turned it for her, and this trilogy and My Antonia and what all those are based on, like I said, drew upon her memories of the Great Plains and wrote very personal works about her life. And so this is where it really clicked with me, and the pivotal piece to change the point, I think, of all about this. There was a quote from her that he referenced, and a thing she said was, "Life began for me when I ceased to admire and began to remember."
Mm.
And so he thought, oh, maybe this isn't about her, but this is about me. And what a thing to think about. So this then becomes his writing process for this thing. He took an afternoon and he wrote down 80 different memories from his childhood.
Wow.
Spent the whole time just coming up with it, like drudging up all, not even drudging, like the good, the bad, everything that he had locked away. Instead of trying to admire certain things, try to remember. Yeah. And so then he took these memories, sketched this narrative arc about family, about rebirth, because in the same way for him, he was ready for it. Because now he's 40. He's at the exact age his dad was when they moved to Arkansas.
Oh my God.
And his daughter is 7, the age he was when they moved. He also felt like his dad, like he'd been irresponsibly chasing this dream in the same way his dad was chasing farming. He's been chasing filmmaking. And so he's like, oh, I get these perspectives now.
Right.
I get all of them, which is just amazing.
The synchronicities, Taylor.
I know.
The synchronicities are off the chart. My scales over here are flying.
The last one, he's teaching. Like I said, he's going to be going into teaching. So he's studying and learning these other artists. And a person that he is learning about is Dostoevsky, the Russian author.
Mm.
As he's writing this script, he's been reading this guy's biography and literary analysis. And he says that Dostoevsky, the whole thing was he's trying to find himself in every character. He doesn't just see himself in one character and make all these side characters. He really invests in every person. So Lee said, that's what I tried to do. And that's how he ends up writing Minari in these months in 2018.
My God.
Yeah. My God. It's amazing.
This is, I mean, it's when I love it. I don't know. I'm into synchronicities. I'm into parallels. This is stacked deep.
Mm-hmm.
And
you have to go along with it. Like if you're him, you have to be like, I'm just going to keep going with this. How
the stars align. I mean, yeah, it's the planets coming aligning. It's that's the thing. That's the magic of it. Is so few people have their head out of the sand looking for that. And he just
or
was.
a lesser person would have made a adaptation of My Antonia. You know,
right.
Like they wouldn't have kept going, and then it would have been horrible, and then they would have been cursed or something. But yeah, like I said, it's the last chance. But now to get it made, that was not even his intention.
Right. No. Yeah. He's just writing to have something palpable, tangible to show for it. It's like I wrote a screenplay.
So there it is. So he leaves it with his agent, and now he's on to teach in South Korea. It's 2018. That's his job. He's doing that for a year.
Oh wow.
You know, and maybe continues his contract, and that's his life. He said, this was my thing. We'll see what happens, you know, but not thinking anything. Stephen Yeun, in 2018, he had just moved on from The Walking Dead, and he signed with this new agent, Christina Chow. She said, hey, Stephen, did you know that I also rep your cousin, who is Lee Isaac Chung, who is a first cousin of Stephen's wife? They actually crossed paths at weddings, like they tangentially knew each other.
What?
And so this agent says, I have a script that he just wrote. Would you be interested in it? And it wasn't like Lee Isaac Chung didn't know this. He was like, I knew that he was my cousin and that he's a famous actor, but it's like, I'm not going to go to him and cross this line and make a whole scene. But his agent did, because that's her job and that's what she could do. So he reads it and is on board.
Once you have that, you can find the financing. If you have somebody that's just coming off The Walking Dead, yeah, we can get some money together for this type of thing.
Right. So he's on. They also get, in a very short period of time, and I apologize for the pronunciation, Youn Yuh-Jung, who is huge in Korea.
Mm,
She plays the grandma, and she
yeah.
like, you can't even say she's like the Meryl Streep of whatever, because she's just her own person. Like, she is an
She
epic.
in her own right has her own amazing career
Yeah,
behind,
yeah, 50
behind her.
years. Yeah. I watched
She's
an
no
interview.
newcomer to this.
Right, right. I watched an interview that Bong Joon-ho actually did with her, the director
Oh,
and writer of
yes.
Parasite, and
Go check out our episode on Parasite.
exactly, yeah. But as an example of her epicness, she has a reality show called Yoon's Kitchen in South Korea, where she's planted in a restaurant with other Korean celebrities, and they cook for strangers and foreigners who have no idea who they are, like, as a hilarious bit. Like,
Oh,
that's how
wow.
famous she is. It's a joke how famous she is and that these people don't know her. And then
Wow.
there's even a spin-off of that show called Yoon's Stay, and it's her and the main actress from Parasite who run a bed and breakfast for foreigners, and it's a joke about how they don't know who
Oh,
they are
man.
and can they do these basic tasks. Like, that's how big she is.
That's amazing.
So, but
It's funny, like, seeing the buzz around her. I mean, she is incredible in the
Mhm.
movie. She's absolutely amazing in the movie. So, but people are being introduced to her for the first time here
because she
in the
doesn't do
States.
American films. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But that's the caliber that she is. She's hilarious in these interviews. She's so impulsive, she said. She read a few pages of the script. She said, I'm in. Well, she had to ask, is this guy's life? Or is this and it's like, no, this is his story. And she said, perfect, I'm in. And then
Nice.
she also part of it was that she heard it was Brad Pitt's production company, Plan B.
Right.
And so she thought, oh, Brad Pitt. She asked, okay, well, how much are they making it for? They said 2 billion won, which is a Korean currency. But she had heard 20 billion, which would be like $20 million.
Right.
So she heard it wrong. She added a zero because she's like, today with 2 billion won, you couldn't even make a Korean film. Like, a $2 million film is super, 2 million US dollars is super small. But she was like,
nothing.
it's too late.
I mean, 10 years ago, it was nothing. It's even less now. It's really amazing. And to have the star power that this will command, and Will Patton, even an American star, coming on to second in the supporting role. He's amazing, by the way. He plays like the religious town endearing nut that helps the family along. But to have that star power behind this, and to have Brad Pitt producing, and you can get just under 2 million to do it. This is as close to as independent filmmaking as Brad Pitt's going to get.
Right, exactly. Well, and it's just so funny that she misheard and just was like, oh, 20, that doesn't sound bad. And then 2, I know this is a very different production than I was planning.
Because
and some of this
is literally a trailer in a field.
Right, yeah, and it's hot and no air conditioning. And and the whole thing too was the American differences. Like I said, she is top of the top in Korea, and she thinks, okay, they're going to treat me, but nobody knows, nobody on the crew, and they don't have the money. But she thinks, okay, they usually, if you're the star, like, you're going to have the first week off because you're working out the production kinks or the location kinks or this or that. And so, but they had her, she was on scene 1, day 1. They were filming her at 6 a.m. or whatever. Like, she doesn't get, and then she thought, also, I'm old and everybody else is young. I'll get day on, day off. That's like a pretty typical schedule. But they had her working 5 days in a row every day.
Here you work. Goodbye.
Yeah. But she loves it. She's in for it. Anytime she's very impulsive, but she's also like, I got to do what I said I'm going to do. She's very committed. And that comes through. Great. And then the same thing in terms of commitment with the main boy, Alan.
Fabulous. The entire ensemble here is so naturally beautiful, but he does a particularly amazing job carrying much of the weight of the film. I mean, the movie is very much about the father and that marriage, but it is really through the eyes of the David character played by Alan.
Yeah. And Alan, they said they went through 90 different casting tapes for these young boys. They all are non-actors. The other challenge is they also have to speak 2 languages.
Yeah, in his first moments, I'm like exclaiming at like how good this kid is, bilingual, flipping between the two, naturally emoting. I mean, it's like he is so natural. It's just it's just on the edge of his fingers.
Yeah,
the camera's not there.
And this was his first film, and he was 7 when they filmed it.
It's a knockout top to bottom. Yeah.
So then Lee Isaac Chung hears about this. He cut short his teaching contract because they're like, well, we're going to film this in the summer of 2019, but he's teaching. So he goes back to America to do this thing. And as far as the production side of it, we mentioned a little bit, but Chung's father now grows Minari in Kansas City. And so he took some plants from him to use when they used it on the set, but he still didn't tell him that they were filming. He thought maybe his dad was
What?
figuring out what was going on, but he didn't explicitly explain what he was what he was doing this for. So he still
Oh my
hasn't told
god.
his family that he's telling their family story. So I saw an interview. Again, Bong Joon-ho was interviewing, but he was interviewing Lee Isaac Chung and just asking, as a filmmaker, questions, as a very curious man, because Bong Joon-ho is so precise and particular.
Right.
And this is very fluid, but it's
It's like
still a script and it's still
they
written by him. But
built everything in
prepare,
Parasite.
yeah,
If you've
yeah,
seen Parasite, and it feels totally natural, they built it. They built it almost at all. It's pretty
hmm
staggering. And so you have a
yeah.
film, Minari, less than $2 million. I mean, they got the land.
You got to get
know?
lucky. Yeah, yeah. So that's what he was asking, because he knows that Lee Isaac Chung is a great filmmaker, and how does he play with extreme specificity but also serendipity. So he was asking about, it felt very natural and like we said, like covering every character, and like he asked, like, was there a voiceover at one point, because it does, like you said, follows the dad. But this seems like one of those kind of sentimental movies where you need the main character to kind of
I swear, and I was saying this. I was saying this in the first act too. I expected this to be a frame story.
Yeah, that's exactly
I
the
expected
terminology.
this to be, yeah, I was expecting this to be a reconnecting with the past type thing, and almost a la, hillbilly elegy type of
Right, right, right.
thing. Seeing it through, maybe the young boy is growing up and revisiting one of these. That was kind of where I was in my headspace expecting. I try not to expect too much. I don't watch a ton of trailers, and I just try not to build up too much in my head about what the film is going to be before I watch them. But that was, I guess, my kind of my inclination, is that this would be a reconnection through memory and that kind of thing.
hmm
But it's not at all. It's played really
Yeah.
straight.
It was great that Bong Joon-ho has that sensibility to ask that question. Like, he's such a
Yeah.
good filmmaker. He's like, did it? And Chung was like, that's so funny, because I did write the script with the voiceover of the dad.
Wow.
And when it got to
Yeah.
production, he realized, he was like, you can learn there's as much wisdom from the kids as the adults. Like, it's
Mm.
it's the whole family. So he realized the voiceover
Mhm.
wasn't working and took it out and reworked the ending so that there would be no voiceover. So that was one of the things where that was very specific. And then in terms of the serendipity, the stream where it was, they were looking for a place, they couldn't find it. The location scout is from Tulsa. He was like, oh, there's this stream where I played at as a kid. And he was like, oh,
Oh
that's
man.
perfect. Like, that has to be the place. And that's where they were. And then he said, we
Wow.
shot there for one day. And Bong Joon-ho was like, everything from the stream was shot in one day. And he was like, yeah,
Wow.
that's just how they were doing it. Like I said, 25-day shoot. They had to get
They
it all done.
planted that creekside with full on Minari everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
That's amazing.
And then in terms of the casting and the connection to the family, because Bong Joon-ho was like, he doesn't have the hubris to be like, oh, this, and showing him footage of, this was how my grandma acted. Like, you have to do this. It's just like, don't imitate
Right.
my family. Like, do what you
Right.
will with the story. So that was also some of the serendipity that he added in that made
Well,
it
it's
into the
interesting
final
because
thing.
it is his story. I'm not saying the movie, but in terms of what the subject matter is, it's his
Yeah.
story. It's the other author's story. It's other people's story. It's real. It's
hmm
fake, all at the same time, and that's what you kind of have to live in. This is not an adaptation, nor is it like strictly autobiographical. But these things are real, and these people do it. We've all felt these types of things.
Yeah.
It's threading that needle, and it's a very, very fine line.
hmm Looking at now the result of this, he finally shows his family, his mom, dad, and his older sister. After it
Mhm.
was made, he came came home for Thanksgiving. He said, "Hey, I made this."
With all these
Um,
stars in it.
right.
They produced it. Sorry about sorry
Yeah.
about I didn't tell you.
I thought you were teaching in South Korea. No, no, that's what I needed the Minari for. Was this was this movie that I made about us? And he said his mom and sister laughed and cried, and his dad
Aw.
sat quietly the whole time. And then he said, at the end, all he said was "good movie," and then walked outside to gather himself. And in this interview, Lee Isaac Chung's voice cracks as he's talking about it, because he said he came back and we hugged for 5 minutes. And he said, I think he felt that I understood him,
Aw.
which is really
Wow.
the most you can ask for when you're making something like this.
I mean, that sounds like how the dad would have responded in the film.
Right.
Because very much, I mentioned Will Patton's character. He's the kind of the
Yeah.
town religious guy that helps them on the farm, and so much of I saw much delight in the interaction between his character and Stephen Yun's character, the father, because
Mhm.
they are so different in so many ways, but they're not putting those things ahead of each other, and so they do find this kindredship between each other, even though they come from two completely different cultures and don't
Yeah.
understand each other. That's not more important than what's here right now in front of us. So it was really enlightening to see what those types of interactions were like. It's, set in the 80s in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Seeing these immigrants really get settled and seeing the culture that emerges out of that and the happiness of trading things, because the religious guy is not, he's never grown these Korean
Yeah.
plants, but here he is
Yeah.
learning and even having input because he is a farmer and he's grown things in this part of the world. So there's definitely knowledge there that the Stephen Yun character needs,
Mhm.
because it's not a complete one-to-one. It's really close, but you have to have that, oh, we got to adjust it 3 or 4%. Oh, interesting idea. And seeing that mesh of these cultures come together is the beauty of this film. The subtle, just smoothness of this film is so much
Yeah.
of when people say this, on the poster, this is the film we need right now. That's what it means, because
Right.
I connected very deeply to just even just setting of the film. I come from rural Georgia. And so I was the entire time seeing my town reflected in this, and understanding the questions that people I would have been around, how would they have viewed this family moving in and setting up a farm, and what
Mhm.
what would have been like if my mother had given them some just been neighbors, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What would that have looked like? What would that have felt like? And how important it is to be bringing up those experiences now,
Yeah.
because we've really got to put more a bigger light on what we call the American dream, because this is it right here. Minari is it.
Yeah.
The conceit of this film is, how can we financially make this farm solvable? Like, how can we actually survive? How can we make this work? It is a dream. So
And
it's
yeah.
those
And
all
even
those things are why this is so important.
Mhm. And even the dream of Lee Isaac Chung betting on his story, because
Yes.
now it's off to the races.
God.
Because this then just went to the festivals. They made it in time, won all the awards, continues on. Like you said, 6 Oscars. People are like, what in the world is this? This is the story of that.
85
Now,
wins, 212 nominations. It's nominated for all the BAFTA awards. It
yeah,
won Best Motion Picture Foreign Language at the Golden Globes. It's nominated
contentious, but
for
yeah.
the entire SCAT. The cast is nominated for a Screen Actors Guild. There's a
Yeah.
lot to be determined. It's up for a ton of stuff. I mean, and it could
Yeah.
take home the gold in the
Yeah.
Oscars. I mean, it very
Yeah.
well could. I mean, and I was shocked even realizing it's nominated for 6. That's huge standing.
Yeah. And now Lee Isaac Chung, the 2 next things are in development. I don't know if he's still teaching, but he's definitely continuing to make films. Like, this was his potential last thing, but he's developing a romance film that's set both in New York and Hong Kong. And then the big thing that he's directing and now rewriting, there's a live action adaptation of an anime film called Your Name, which, if you don't know anime, you don't know anything, but it is massive. Like, it was an instant classic. It grossed 303 million in Japan alone when it
Oh my
came out
gosh.
in 2016.
Oh, wow.
It is officially the 5th highest grossing Japanese film, the anime. It is the 10th highest grossing animated film in the whole world, and it is the 19th highest grossing non-English film of all time. And he's
Wow.
directing and rewriting the live action version
Wow.
of it.
Oh my gosh.
So that got passed
That is
on to
going to be
him.
fantastic.
So it's like,
oh my
look
God.
at those 2. Yeah.
I adore the where his influences here and the openness.
Yeah.
I'm not making my life. I'm not making an adaptation of her book, but it's all of it, all at the same time, and
Yeah.
that's great art. And I feel like we cover these things more and more. Man, like, look what he came down to. His life, what he knew about.
Mhm.
He was able to bring
Yeah.
that to the screen, and to bring that round with his own father.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Amazing.
couldn't ask for something more meaningful.
So we'll get to now the explanation of the metaphor for Minari. So the quirk about this particular plant is that it grows well in its second year. It's okay its first, but after it's died and come back, it grows even better than before. And the trick of it too, it grows. This is why he called it a weed and she had to correct him because it grows so expansively without doing much to it. You let it be and it grows in its second year, which I think is the perfect metaphor for the director and writer, and a call to like, go make some stuff that's about you, even if you didn't think you could, or you tried and it didn't work. Like, this is the second year.
Yeah, your story. I mean, you can't. People discount themselves, so don't be the first one to. I heard that piece of advice: is don't be the first person to discount yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like your stories are valuable, your experiences are valuable, and look what if you can put your nose to the grindstone here and pick up on themes. And I know not everybody's into all the parallels and all those types of things, but I mean, this is how he did it. And to have something this amazing, this beautiful, and look at the success. I mean, it's a rocket ship. So we'll see what happens here, and we'll see what happens here in a few months with the Oscars.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you so much, Taylor. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for following along. I hope you learned something. That was awesome. That's probably one of my favorite discoverings. I mean, for real. I mean, just that discovery of drawing on those influences and the openness of it. I absolutely, it's incredible. So I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Hit us up at ILLITERATE on Instagram. Let us know what you're reading. Let us know what you're watching, please. And you never know, we might do an episode on it. All you have to do is talk to us.
Thank you all so much, and we will catch you next week.